Body by Dorothy L. Sayers. Part 3. Mr. Parker was a bachelor, and occupied a Georgian but inconvenient flat at number 12 Great Ormond Street, for which he paid £1 a week. His exertions in the cause of civilization were rewarded not by the gift of diamond rings from empresses or munificent cheques from grateful prime ministers, but by a modest, though sufficient, salary drawn from the pockets of a British taxpayer. He awoke after a long day of arduous and inconclusive labour to the smell of burnt porridge. Through his bedroom window, hygienically open top and bottom, a raw fog was rolling slowly in, and the sight of a pair of winter pants flung hastily over a chair the previous night fretted him with a sense of the sordid absurdity of the human form. The telephone bell rang, and he crawled wretchedly out of bed and into the sitting-room, where Mrs. Munns, who did for him by the day, was laying the table, sneezing as she went. Mr. Bunter was speaking. "His lordship says he'd be very glad, sir, if you could make it convenient to step round to breakfast." If the odour of kidneys and bacon had been wafted along the wire, Mr. Parker could not have experienced a more vivid sense of consolation. "Tell his lordship I'll be with him in half an hour," he said thankfully, and plunging into the bathroom, which was also the kitchen, he informed Mrs. Munns, who was just making tea from a kettle which had gone off the boil, that he should be out to breakfast. "You can take the porridge home, for the family," he added viciously, and flung off his dressing-gown with such determination that Mrs. Munns could only scuttle away with a snort. A 19 bus deposited him in Piccadilly only 15 minutes later than his rather sanguine impulse had prompted him to suggest, and Mr. Bunter served him with glorious food, incomparable coffee, and the Daily Mail, before a blazing fire of wood and coal. A distant voice singing the Et interim veturus est from Bach's Mass in B minor proclaimed that for the owner of the flat cleanliness and godliness met at least once a day. And presently Lord Peter roamed in, moist and verbena-scented, in a bathrobe cheerfully patterned with unnaturally variegated peacocks. "Morning, old dear," said that gentleman. "Beast of a day, ain't it? Very good of you to trundle out in it. But I had a letter I wanted you to see, and I hadn't the energy to come round to your place. Bunter and I have been making a night of it." "What's the letter?" "Never talk business with your mouth full. Have some Oxford marmalade. Then I'll show you my Dante. They brought it round last night. What ought I to read this morning, Bunter?" "Lord Erith's collection is going to be sold, my lord. There's a column about it in the Morning Post. I think your lordship should look at the review of Sir Julian Freke's new book, The Psychological Basis of the Conscience, in the Times Literary Supplement. And then there's a very singular little burglary in the Chronicle, my lord, and an attack on titled families in the Herald, rather ill-written, if I may say so, but not without unconscious humour, which your lordship will appreciate." "All right, give me that and the burglary." "I have looked over the other papers, and marked your lordship's after-breakfast reading," pursued Mr. Bunter, indicating a formidable pile. "Oh, pray don't allude to it. You take my appetite away." There was silence but for the crunching of toast and the crackling of paper. "I see they've adjourned the inquest," said Parker presently. "Nothing else to do," said Lord Peter. "But Lady Levy arrived last night and will have to go and fail to identify the body this morning, for Suggs' benefit. Time, too." Silence fell again. "I don't think much of your burglary, Bunter. Competent, of course, but no imagination. I want imagination in a criminal. Where's the Morning Post?" After a further silence, Lord Peter said, "You might send for the catalogue, Bunter. That Apollonius Rhodius might be worth looking at." "No, I'm damned if I'm going to stodge through that review, but you can stick the book on the library list if you like. His book on crime was entertaining enough as far as it went, but the fellow's got a bee in his bonnet. Thinks God's the secretion of the liver. All right once in a way, but there's no need to keep on about it. There's nothing you can't prove if your outlook is only sufficiently limited. Look at Sugg." "I beg your pardon, I wasn't attending. Argentines are steadying a little, I see." "Milligan," said Lord Peter. "Oil's in a bad way. Levy's made a difference there. That funny little boom in Peruvians that came on just before he disappeared has died away again. I wonder if he was concerned in that. Do you know at all?" "No, I'll find out. What was it?" Oh, absolutely dud enterprise which hadn't been heard of for years. It suddenly took a little lease of life last week. I happened to notice it because my mother got let in for a couple of hundred shares a long time ago. It's never paid a dividend. Now it's petered out again. Whimsy pushed his plate aside and lit a pipe. Having finished, I don't mind doing some work. How did you get on yesterday? I didn't. I sleuthed up and down those flats in my own bodily shape and 2 different disguises. I was a gas meter man and a collector for a home for lost doggies, and I didn't get a thing to go on, except a servant in the top flat at the Battersea Bridge Road end of a row who said she thought she'd heard a bump on the roof one night. Asked which night, she couldn't rightly say. Asked if it was Monday night, she thought it very likely. Asked if it mightn't have been the high wind on Saturday night that blew my chimney-pot off, and she couldn't say but what it might have been. Asked if she was sure it was on the roof and not inside the flat. Said to be sure they did find a picture tumbled down next morning. Very suggestible girl. I saw your friends, Mr. and Mrs. Appledore, who received me coldly, but could make no definite complaint about Thipps except that his mother dropped her H's, and that he once called on them uninvited, armed with a pamphlet about anti-vivisection. The Indian colonel on the first floor was loud, but unexpectedly friendly. He gave me an Indian curry for supper, and some very good whisky. But he's a sort of a hermit, and all he could tell me was that he couldn't stand Mrs. Appledore. Did you get nothing at the house? Only Levy's private diary. I brought it away with me. Here it is. It doesn't tell one much, though. It's full of entries like Tom and Annie to dinner, and my dear wife's birthday. Gave her an old opal ring. Mr. Arbuthnot dropped in to tea. He wants to marry Rachel, but I should like someone steadier for my treasure. Still, I thought it would show who came to the house and so on. He evidently wrote it up at night. There's no entry for Monday. I expect it'll be useful. Lord Peter turned over the pages. Poor old papa. I say I'm not so certain now he was done away with. He detailed to Mr. Parker his day's work. Arbuthnot? Is that the Arbuthnot of the diary? I suppose so. I hunted him up because I knew he was fond of fooling round the stock exchange. As for Milligan, he looks all right, but I believe he's pretty ruthless in business, so you never can tell. Then there's the red-headed secretary. Lightning calculator man with a face like a fish. Keeps on saying nothing. Got the tar baby in his family tree, I should think. Milligan's got a jolly good motive for it, at any rate. Suspending Levy for a few days. Then there's the new man. What new man? Ah, that's the letter I mentioned to you. Where did I put it? Ah, here we are. Good parchment paper, printed address of solicitor's office in Salisbury, and postmark to correspond. Very precisely written, with a fine nib by an elderly businessman of old-fashioned habits. Parker took the letter and read. Salisbury, solicitors, Milford Hall, Salisbury, 17th of November, 1920. Sir, with reference to your advertisement today in the personal column of the Times, I am disposed to believe that the eyeglasses and chain in question may be those I lost on the L.B. and S.C. Electric Railway while visiting London last Monday. I left Victoria by the 5:45 train and did not notice my loss until I arrived at Balham. This indication and the optician's specification of the glasses, which I enclose, should suffice at once as an identification and a guarantee of my bona fide. If the glasses should prove to be mine, I should be greatly obliged to you if you would kindly forward them to me by registered post, as the chain was a present from my daughter, and is one of my dearest possessions. Thanking you in advance for this kindness, and regretting the trouble to which I shall be putting you, I am yours very truly, Thomas Crimplesham. To Lord Peter Wimsey, 110, Piccadilly. Dear me. That's what you might call unexpected, said Parker. Yes, either it's some extraordinary misunderstanding, or Mr. Crimplesham's a very bold and cunning villain. Or possibly, of course, they are the wrong glasses. We may as well get a ruling on that point at once. I suppose the glasses are at the Yard. We should just ring 'em up and ask 'em to send 'em round an optician's description at once. And you might ask at the same time whether it's a very common prescription. Right you are, said Parker, and took the receiver off its hook. And now, said his friend, when the message was delivered, just come into the library for a minute." On the library table Lord Peter had spread out a series of bromide prints, some dry, some damp, and some but half-washed. "These little ones are the originals of the photos we've been taking, and these big ones are enlargements, all made precisely the same scale. This one here is the footmark on the linoleum. We'll put that by itself at present. Now these fingerprints can be divided into 5 lots. I've numbered them on the prints, see, and made a list. A, the fingerprints of Levy himself, of his little bedside book and his hairbrush. This and this. You can't mistake the little scar on the thumb. B, the smudges made by the gloved fingers of the man who slept in Levy's room on Monday night. They show clearly on the water bottle and on the boots superimposed on Levy's. They are very distinct on the boots, surprisingly so for gloved hands, and I deduce that the gloves were rubber ones and had recently been in water. Here's another interesting point. Levy walked in the rain on Monday night, as we know, and these dark marks are mud splashes. You see, they lie over Levy's fingerprints in every case. Now see, on this left boot we find the stranger's thumb mark over the mud on the leather above the heel. Now that's a very funny place to find a thumb mark on a boot, isn't it? That is, if Levy took off his own boots. But it's the place where you'd expect to see it if somebody forcibly removed his boots for him. Again, most of the stranger's finger marks come over the mud marks, but here is one splash of mud which comes on top of them again, which makes me infer that the stranger came back to Park Lane wearing Levy's boots, in a cab, carriage, or car, but that at some point or other he walked just a little way, just enough to tread in a puddle and get a splash on the boots. What do you say? Very pretty. A bit intricate, though, and the marks are not all that I would wish a fingerprint to be. Well, I won't lay too much stress on them, but it fits in with our previous ideas. Now, let's turn to C. The prints obligingly left by my own particular villain on the further edge of Thipps's bath, where you spotted them and I ought to be scourged for not having spotted them. The left hand, you notice, and the base of the palm and the fingers, but not the tips, looking as though he'd steadied himself on the edge of the bath while leaning down to adjust something at the bottom. The pince-nez, perhaps. Gloved, you see, but showing no ridge or seam of any kind. I say rubber, you say rubber. That's that. Now see here. D and E come off a visiting card of mine. There's this thing at the corner, marked F, but that you can disregard. In the original document it's a sticky mark left by the thumb of the youth who took it from me, after first removing a piece of chewing gum from his teeth with his finger to tell me that Mr. Milligan might or might not be disengaged. D and E are the thumb marks of Mr. Milligan and his red-haired secretary. I'm not clear which is which, but I saw the youth with the chewing gum hand the card to the secretary, and when I got into the inner shrine I saw John P. Milligan standing with it in his hand. So it's one or the other. And for the moment it's immaterial to our purpose which is which. I boned the card from the table when I left. Well now, Parker, here's what's been keeping Bunter and me up till the small hours. I've measured and measured every way backwards and forwards till my head's spinning, and I've stared till I'm nearly blind. But I'm hanged if I can make my mind up. Question 1. Is C identical with B? Question 2. Is D or E identical with B? There's nothing to go on but the size and shape, of course, and the marks are very faint. But what do you think? Parker shook his head doubtfully. Well, I think E might almost be put out of the question. It seems such an excessively long and narrow thumb. But I think there's a decided resemblance between the span of B on the water bottle and C on the bath, and I don't see any reason why D shouldn't be the same as B, only there's so little to judge from. Well, your untutored judgment and my measurements have brought us both to the same conclusion, if you can call it a conclusion. Another thing, why on earth should we try to connect B with C? The fact that you and I happen to be friends doesn't make it necessary to conclude that the two cases we happen to be interested in have any organic connection with each other. Why should they? The only person who thinks they do is Sugg, and he's nothing to go by. It'd be different if there was any truth in the suggestion that the man in the bath was Levy, but we know for a certainty he wasn't. It's ridiculous to suppose that the same man was employed in committing two totally distinct crimes on the same night, one in Battersea and the other in Park Lane. I know. Of course, we mustn't forget that Levy was in Battersea at the time. And now we know he didn't return home at 12 as was supposed. We've no reason to think he ever left Battersea at all. True. But there are other places in Battersea besides Phipps's bathroom, and he wasn't in Phipps's bathroom. In fact, come to think of it, that's for one place in the universe where we know definitely that he was not. So what's Phipps's bath got to do with it? I don't know. Well, perhaps we shall get something better to go on today. He leaned back in his chair and smoked thoughtfully for some time over the papers which Bunter had marked for him. They've got you out in the limelight. Thank heaven Sugg hates me too much to give me any publicity. What a dull agony column. Darling Pipsy, come back soon to your distracted Popsy. And the usual young man in need of financial assistance. And the usual injunction to remember thy Creator in the days of thy youth. Hello, there's the bell. Ah, it's our answer from Scotland Yard. The note from Scotland Yard enclosed an optician's specification, identical with that sent by Mr. Crimplesham, and added that it was an unusual one, owing to the particular strength of the lenses and the marked difference between the sight of the two eyes. "That's good enough," said Parker. "Yes," said Wimsey. "Then possibility number 3 is knocked on the head. There remain possibility number 1, accident or misunderstanding, and number 2, deliberate villainy of a remarkably bold and calculating kind, a kind, in fact, characteristic of the author or authors of our two problems. Following the methods inculcated at that university of which I have the honour to be a member, we will now examine severally the various suggestions offered by possibility number 2. This possibility may be again subdivided into 2 or more hypotheses. On hypothesis 1, strongly advocated by my distinguished colleague Professor Snupshed, the criminal, whom we may designate as X, is not identical with Crimplesham, but is using the name of Crimplesham as his shield or aegis. This hypothesis may be further subdivided into 2 alternatives. Alternative A. Crimplesham is an innocent and unconscious accomplice, and X is in his employment. X writes in Crimplesham's name on Crimplesham's office paper, and obtains that the object in question, i.e. the eyeglasses, be dispatched to Crimplesham's address. He's in a position to intercept the parcel before it reaches Crimplesham, and the presumption is that X is Crimplesham's charwoman, office boy, clerk, secretary, or porter. This offers a wide field of investigation. The method of inquiry will be to interview Crimplesham and discover whether he sent the letter, and if not, who has access to his correspondence. Alternative B. Crimplesham is under X's influence, or in his power, and has been induced to write the letter by A. bribery, B. misrepresentation, or C. threats. X may in that case be a persuasive relation or friend, or else a creditor, blackmailer, or assassin. Crimplesham, on the other hand, is obviously venal or a fool. The method of inquiry in this case, I would tentatively suggest, is again to interview Crimplesham, put the facts of the case strongly before him, and assure him, in the most intimidating terms, that he is liable to a prolonged term of penal servitude as an accessory after the fact in the crime of murder. Trusting, gentlemen, that you have followed me thus far, we will pass to the consideration of hypothesis number 2, to which I personally incline, and according to which X is identical with Crimplesham. In this case, Crimplesham, who is, in the words of an English classic, a man of infinite resource and sagacity, correctly deduces that, of all people, the last whom we shall expect to find answering our advertisement is the criminal himself. Accordingly, he plays a bold game of bluff. He invents an occasion on which the glasses may very easily have been lost or stolen, and applies for them. If confronted, nobody will be more astonished than he to learn where they were found. He will produce witnesses to prove that he left Victoria at 5:45 and emerged from the train at Balham at the scheduled time, and sat up all Monday night playing chess with a respectable gentleman well known in Balham. In this case, the method of inquiry will be to pump a respectable gentleman in Balham, and if he should happen to be a single gentleman with a deaf housekeeper, it may be no easy matter to impugn the alibi. Since outside detective romances, few ticket collectors and bus conductors keep an exact remembrance of all the passengers passing between Balham and London on any and every evening of the week. Finally, gentlemen, I will frankly point out the weak point of all these hypotheses, namely, that none of them offers any explanation as to why the incriminating article was left so conspicuously on the body in the first instance. Mr. Parker had listened with commendable patience to this academic exposition. Might not X be an enemy of Crimplesham's, who designed to throw suspicion upon him? He might. In that case, he should be easy to discover, since he obviously lives in close proximity to Crimplesham and his classes, and Crimplesham, in fear of his life, will then be a valuable ally for the prosecution. But the first possibility of all, misunderstanding or accident. Well, for purposes of discussion, nothing, because it really doesn't afford any data for discussion. Well, in any case, the obvious course appears to be to go to Salisbury. That seems indicated. Very well. Is it to be you or me or both of us? It is to be me. And that for two reasons. First, because if, by possibility number 2, hypothesis 1, alternative A, Crimplesham is an innocent cat's paw, the person who put in the advertisement is the proper person to hand over the property. Secondly, because if we are to adopt hypothesis 2, we must not overlook the sinister possibility that Crimplesham X is laying a careful trap to rid himself of a person who so unwarily advertised in the daily press his interest in the solution of the Battersea Park mystery. That appears to be an argument for us both going. Far from it. Why play into the hands of Crimplesham X by delivering over to him the only 2 men in London with the evidence, such as it is, and, shall I say, the wits, to connect him with the Battersea body? But if we told the yard where we were going, and we both got nobbled, it would afford strong presumptive evidence of Crimplesham's guilt. And anyhow, if he didn't get hanged for murdering the man in the bath, he'd at least get hanged for murdering us. Well, if he only murdered me, you could still hang him. What's the good of wasting a sound, marriageable young male like yourself? Besides, how about old Levy? If you're incapacitated, do you think anybody else is going to find him? But we could frighten Crimplesham by threatening him with a yard. Oh, dash it all, if it comes to that, I can threaten him by threatening him with you, which, seeing you hold what evidence there is much more to the point. And then, suppose it's a wild goose chase after all. You'll have wasted time when you might be getting on with the case. There are several things that need doing. Well, said Parker, silenced but reluctant. Why can't I go in that case? Oh, bosh! I'm retained by old Mrs. Phipps, for whom I entertain the greatest respect, to deal with this case, and it's only by courtesy I'm allowing you to have anything to do with it at all. Will you at least take Bunter? In deference to your feelings, I will take Bunter, though he could be far more usefully employed, taking photographs or overhauling my wardrobe. When is there a good train to Salisbury, Bunter? There's an excellent train at 10:50, my lord. Kindly make arrangements to catch it, said Lord Peter, throwing off his bathrobe and trailing away with it into his bedroom. And Parker, if you've got nothing else to do, you might get hold of Levy's secretary and look into that little matter of the Peruvian oil. Lord Peter took with him for light reading in the train Sir Reuben Levy's diary. It was a simple and, in the light of recent facts, rather a pathetic document. The terrible fighter of the Stock Exchange, who could with one nod set the surly bear dancing or bring the savage bull to feed out of his hand, whose breath devastated whole districts with famine or swept financial potentates from their seats, was revealed in private life as kindly, domestic, innocently proud of himself and his belongings, confiding, generous, and a little dull. His own small economies were duly chronicled side by side with extravagant presents to his wife and daughter. Small incidents of household routine appeared, such as man came to mend the conservatory roof, or the new butler, Simpson, has arrived, recommended by the Goldbergs. I think he will be satisfactory. All visitors and entertainments were duly entered, from a very magnificent lunch, given to Lord Dewsbury, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, and Dr. Jabez K. Wart, the American plenipotentiary, for a series of diplomatic dinners to eminent financiers, down to intimate family gatherings of persons designated by Christian names or nicknames. About May there came a mention of Lady Levy's nerves, and further reference was made to the subject in subsequent months. In September it was stated that Freak came to see my dear wife, and advised complete rest and change of scene. She thinks of going abroad with Rachel. The name of the famous nerve specialist occurred as a diner or luncher about once a month, and it came into Lord Peter's mind that Freak would be a good person to consult about Levy himself. "People sometimes tell things to their doctor," he murmured to himself, "and by Jove, if Levy was simply going round to see Freak on Monday night, that rather disposes of the Battersea incident, doesn't it?" He made a note to look up Sir Julian, and turned on further. On September the 18th, Lady Levy and her daughter had left for the south of France. Then, suddenly, under the date October the 5th, Lord Peter found what he was looking for. Goldberg, Skriner, and Milligan to dinner. There was evidence that Milligan had been in the house. There had been a formal entertainment, a meeting as of two duellists shaking hands before the fight. Skriner was a well-known picture dealer. Lord Peter imagined an after-dinner excursion upstairs to see the two Currows in the drawing-room, and the portrait of the eldest Levy girl who died at the age of 16. It was by Augustus John and hung in the bedroom. The name of a red-haired secretary was nowhere mentioned, unless the initial S, occurring in another entry, referred to him. Throughout September and October, Anderson of Wyndham's had been a frequent visitor. Lord Peter shook his head over the diary and turned to the consideration of the Battersea Park mystery. Whereas in the Levy affair it was easy enough to supply a motive for the crime, if crime it were, and the difficulty was to discover the method of its carrying out and its whereabouts of the victim. In the other case, the chief obstacle to inquiry was the entire absence of any imaginable motive. It was odd that, although the papers had carried news of the affair from one end of the country to the other, and a description of the body had been sent to every police station in the country, nobody has as yet come forward to identify the mysterious occupant of Mr. Phipps's bath. It was true that the description, which mentioned the clean-shaven chin, elegantly cut hair, and the pince-nez, was rather misleading. But on the other hand, the police had managed to discover the number of molars missing, and the height, complexion, and other data were correctly enough stated, as also the date at which death had presumably occurred. It seemed, however, as though the man had melted out of society without leaving a gap or so much as a ripple. Assigning a motive for the murder of a person without relations or antecedents, or even clothes, is like trying to visualize the fourth dimension. Admirable exercise for the imagination, but arduous and inconclusive. Even if the day's interview should disclose black spots in the past or present of Mr. Crimplesham, how were they to be brought into connection with a person apparently without a past, and whose present was confined to the narrow limits of a bath and a police mortuary? "Bunter, I beg that in future you will restrain me from starting two hares at once. These cases are getting to be a strain on my constitution. One hare has nowhere to run from, and the other has nowhere to run to. It's a kind of mental DT, Bunter. When this is all over, I shall turn pussyfoot, forswear the police news, and take to an emollient diet of the works of the late Charles Garvice." It was its comparative proximity to Milford Hill that induced Lord Peter to lunch at the Minster Hotel, rather than at the White Hart or some other more picturesquely situated hostel. It was not a lunch calculated to cheer his mind. As in all cathedral cities, the atmosphere of the close pervades every nook and corner of Salisbury, and no food in that city but seems faintly flavoured with prayer-books. As he sat sadly consuming that impassive pale substance known to the English as cheese, unqualified, for there are cheeses which go openly by their names, as Stilton, Camembert, Gruyere, Wensleydale, or Gorgonzola, but cheese is cheese, and everywhere the same. He inquired of the waiter the whereabouts of Mr. Crimplesham's office. The waiter directed him to a house rather further up the street on the opposite side, adding, "But anybody'll tell you, sir, Mr. Crimplesham's very well known hereabouts." "He's a good solicitor, I suppose?" "Oh, yes, sir. You couldn't do better than trust to Mr. Crimplesham, sir. There's folks say he's old-fashioned, but I'd rather have my little bits of business done by Mr. Crimplesham than by any of these fly-away young men. Not but that Mr. Crimplesham will be retiring soon, sir, I don't doubt, for he must be close on 80, sir, if he's a day. And then there's young Mr. Wicks to carry on the business. He's very nice, steady young gentleman, like." Is Mr. Crimplesham really as old as that? Dear me, he must be very active for his years. A friend of mine was doing business in town with him last week. Oh, he's wonderfully active, sir, and with his game leg too, you'd be surprised. But there, sir, I often think when a man's once past a certain age, the older he grows, the tougher he gets. And women the same, or more so. Very likely, said Lord Peter, calling up and dismissing the mental picture of a gentleman of 80 with a game leg, carrying a dead body over the roof of a Battersea flat at midnight. He's tough, sir, tough, is old Joey Bagstock. Tough and devilish sly, he added thoughtlessly. Indeed, sir. Well, I couldn't say, I'm sure. Oh, I beg your pardon, I was quoting poetry. Very silly of me. I got in the habit at my mother's knee, and I can't seem to break myself of it. No, sir, said the waiter, pocketing a liberal tip. Thank you very much, sir. You'll find the house easy, just before you come to Penny-Farthing Street, sir, about 2 turnings off, on the right-hand side opposite. I'm afraid that disposes of Crimplesham X. I'm rather sorry. He was a fine, sinister figure, as I'd pictured him. Still, his may yet be the brain behind the hands, the aged spider sitting invisible in the centre of a vibrating web, you know, Bunter? Yes, my lord, said Bunter. They were walking up the street together. I think, Bunter, you might step into this little shop and purchase a sporting paper, and if I do not emerge from the villain's lair, say, within 3/4 of an hour, you may take such steps as your perspicuity may suggest. Mr. Bunter turned into the shop as desired, and Lord Peter walked across and rang the lawyer's bell with decision. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth is my long suit here, I fancy. And when the door was opened by the clerk, he delivered over his card with an unflinching air. He was ushered immediately into a confidential-looking office, obviously furnished in the early years of Queen Victoria's reign, and never altered since. A lean, frail-looking old gentleman rose briskly from his chair as he entered, and limped forward to meet him. "My dear sir, how extremely good of you to come in person! Indeed, I am ashamed to have given you so much trouble. I trust you were passing this way, and that my glasses have not put you to any great inconvenience. Pray take a seat, Lord Peter." He peered gratefully at the young man over a pince-nez, obviously the fellow of that now adorning a dossier in Scotland Yard. Lord Peter sat down. The lawyer sat down. Lord Peter picked up a glass paperweight from a desk and weighed it thoughtfully in his hand. Subconsciously he noted what an admirable set of fingerprints he was leaving upon it. He replaced it with precision on the exact centre of a pile of letters. "It's quite all right. I was here on business. Very happy to be of service to you. Very awkward to lose one's glasses, Mr. Crimplesham." "Yes, I assure you I feel quite lost without them. I have this pair, but they do not fit my nose so well. Besides, that chain has a great sentimental value for me. I was terribly distressed on arriving at Balham to find that I'd lost them. I made inquiries of the railway to no purpose. I feared they'd been stolen. There were such crowds at Victoria, and the carriage was packed with people all the way to Balham. Did you come across them in the train?" "Well, no. I found them in rather an unexpected place. Do you mind telling me if you recognised any of your fellow travellers on that occasion?" The lawyer stared at him. "Not a soul. Why do you ask?" "Well, I thought perhaps the person with whom I found them might have taken them for a joke." The lawyer looked puzzled. "Did the person claim to be an acquaintance of mine? I know practically nobody in London, except the friend with whom I was staying in Balham, Dr. Philpotts. I should be very greatly surprised at his practising a jest upon me. He knew very well how distressed I was at the loss of the glasses. My business was to attend a meeting of shareholders at Medicott's Bank, but the other gentlemen present were all personally unknown to me. I cannot think that any of them would take so great a liberty. In any case, as the glasses are here, I will not inquire too closely into the manner of their restoration. I am deeply obliged to you for your trouble. Pray forgive my seeming inquisitiveness, but I must ask you another question. It sounds rather melodramatic, I'm afraid, but, well, it's this. Are you aware that you have an enemy, anyone, I mean, who would profit by your decease or disgrace?" Mr. Crimplesham sat frozen into stony surprise and disapproval.
May I ask the meaning of this extraordinary question?
Well, the circumstances are a little unusual. You may recollect that my advertisement was addressed to the jeweller who sold the chain.
Yes, that surprised me at the time, but I begin to think your advertisement and your behaviour are all of a piece.
They are. As a matter of fact, I did not expect the owner of the glasses to answer my advertisement, Mr. Crimplesham. You've no doubt read what the papers have to say about the Battersea Park mystery. Well, your glasses are the pair that was found on the body, and they are now in the possession of the police at Scotland Yard, as you may see by this. He placed the specification of the glasses and the official note before Crimplesham. He glanced at the paper, and then looked narrowly at Lord Peter.
Good God! Are you yourself connected with the police?
Not officially. I am investigating the matter privately, in the interests of one of the parties. Mr. Crimplesham rose to his feet.
My good man, this is a very impudent attempt, but blackmail is an indictable offence, and I advise you to leave my office before you commit yourself.
He rang the bell. I was afraid you'd take it like that. It looks as though this ought to have been my friend Detective Parker's job after all. He laid Parker's card on the table beside the specification, and added, If you should wish to see me again, Mr. Crimplesham, before tomorrow morning, you'll find me at the Minster Hotel. Mr. Crimplesham disdained to reply further than to ask the clerk who entered to show this person out. In the entrance, Lord Peter brushed against a tall young man who was just coming in, and who stared at him with surprised recognition. His face, however, aroused no memories in Lord Peter's mind, and that baffled nobleman, calling out Bunter from a newspaper shop, departed to his hotel to get a trunk call through to Parker. Meanwhile, in the office, the meditations of the indignant Mr. Crimplesham were interrupted by the entrance of his junior partner.
"I say," said the latter gentleman, "has somebody done something really wicked at last? Whatever brings such a distinguished amateur of crime to our sober doorstep? I have been the victim of a vulgar attempt at blackmail. An individual passing himself off as Lord Peter Wimsey."
But that is Lord Peter Wimsey," said Mr. Wicks. "There's no mistaking him. I saw him give evidence in the Atterbury Emerald case. He's a big little pot in his way, you know. Goes fishing with the head of Scotland Yard."
"Oh, dear."
Fate arranged that the nerves of Mr. Crimplesham should be tried that afternoon. When, escorted by Mr. Wicks, he arrived at the Minster Hotel, he was informed by the porter that Lord Peter Wimsey had strolled out, mentioning that he thought of attending evensong. "But his man's here, sir, if you want to leave a message." Mr. Wicks thought on the whole it would be well to leave a message, and Mr. Bunter, on inquiry, was found to be sitting by the telephone waiting for a trunk call. As Mr. Wicks addressed him, the bell rang, and Mr. Bunter, politely excusing himself, took down the receiver. "Hello? Is that Mr. Parker? Oh, thanks. Exchange. Sorry, can you put me through to Scotland Yard? Excuse me, gentlemen, keeping you waiting. Exchange. All right. Scotland Yard. Hello? Is that Scotland Yard? Is Detective Parker round there? Can I speak to him? I shall have done in a moment, gentlemen. Oh, hello. Is that you, Mr. Parker? Lord Peter would be much obliged if you could find it convenient to step down to Salisbury, sir. Oh, no, sir, he's in excellent health, sir. Just stepped round to hear evensong. Oh, no, sir. I think tomorrow morning would do excellently. Thank you, sir. Goodbye." It was, in fact, inconvenient for Mr. Parker to leave London. He had had to go and see Lady Levy towards the end of the morning, and subsequently his plans for the day had been thrown out of gear, and his movements delayed by the discovery that the adjourned inquest of Mr. Thipps's unknown visitor was to be held that afternoon, since nothing very definite seemed forthcoming from Inspector Suggs' inquiries. Jury and witnesses had been convened accordingly for 3 o'clock. Mr. Parker might altogether have missed the event had he not run against Sugg that morning at the yard and extracted the information from him as one would a reluctant tooth. Inspector Sugg, indeed, considered Mr. Parker rather interfering. Moreover, he was hand in glove with Lord Peter Wimsey, and Inspector Sugg had no words for the interferingness of Lord Peter. He could not, however, when directly questioned, deny that there was to be an inquest that afternoon, nor could he prevent Mr. Parker from enjoying the inalienable right of any interested British citizen to be present. At a little before 3, therefore, Mr. Parker was in his place, and amusing himself with watching the efforts of those persons who arrived after the room was packed to insinuate, bribe, or bully themselves into a position of vantage. The coroner, a medical man of precise habits and unimaginable aspect, arrived punctually, and looking peevishly round at the crowded assembly, directed all the windows to be opened, thus letting in a stream of drizzling fog upon the heads of the unfortunates on that side of the room. This caused a commotion and some expressions of disapproval, checked sternly by the coroner, who said that with the influenza about again, an unventilated room was a death-trap, that anybody who chose to object to open windows had the obvious remedy of leaving the court, and further, that if any disturbance was made he would clear the court. He took a formamint lozenge and proceeded, after the usual preliminaries, to call up 14 good and lawful persons, and swear them diligently to inquire, and a true presentment make, of all matters touching the death of the gentleman with the pince-nez, and to give a true verdict according to the evidence, so help them God. When an expostulation by a woman juror, an elderly lady in spectacles who kept a sweet shop, and appeared to wish she was back there, had been summarily quashed by the coroner, the jury departed to view the body. Mr. Parker gazed around again, and identified the unhappy Mr. Phipps and the girl Gladys, as they were led into an adjoining room under the grim guard of the police. They were soon followed by a gaunt old lady in a bonnet and mantle. With her, in a wonderful fur coat and a motor bonnet of fascinating construction, came the Dowager Duchess of Denver, her quick dark eyes darting hither and thither about the crowd. The next moment they had lighted on Mr. Parker, who had several times visited the Dower House, and she nodded to him and spoke to the policeman. Before long a way opened magically through the press, and Mr. Parker found himself accommodated with a front seat just behind the Duchess, who greeted him charmingly. "What's happened to poor Peter?" Parker began to explain, and the coroner glanced irritably in their direction. Somebody went up and whispered in his ear, at which he coughed and took another formamint. "We came up by car. So tiresome. Such bad roads between Denver and Gunbridge and Walters. And there were people coming to lunch. I had to put them off. I couldn't let the old lady go alone, could I? By the way, such an odd thing's happened about the Church Restoration Fund. The vicar. Oh dear, here are those people coming back again. Well, I'll have to tell you afterwards. Do look at that woman looking shocked, and the girl in tweeds, trying to look as if she sits on undraped gentlemen every day of her life. I don't mean that. Corpses, of course. But one finds oneself being so Elizabethan nowadays. What an awful little man the coroner is, isn't he? He's looking daggers at me. Do you think he'll dare to clear me out of court, or commit me for what you may call it?" The first part of the evidence was not of great interest to Mr. Parker. The wretched Mr. Phipps, who had caught cold in jail, deposed in an unhappy croak to having discovered the body when he went to take a bath at 8 o'clock. He'd arrived at St. Pancras at 10 o'clock. He sent the girl for brandy. He had never seen the deceased before. He had no idea how he came there. Yes, he had been in Manchester the day before. He had arrived at St. Pancras at 10 o'clock. He had cloak-roomed his bag. At this point Mr. Phipps became very red, unhappy, and confused, and glanced nervously about the court. "Now, Mr. Phipps," said the coroner briskly, "we must have your movements quite clear. You must appreciate the importance of the matter. You have chosen to give evidence which you need not have done, but having done so you will find it best to be perfectly explicit." "Yes." "Have you cautioned this witness, officer?" The coroner turned sharply to Inspector Sugg. The inspector replied that he had told Mr. Phipps that anything he said might be used against him in his trial. Mr. Phipps became ashy, and said in a bleating voice that he hadn't meant to do anything that wasn't right. This remark proved a mild sensation, and the coroner became even more acidulated in manner than before. "Is anybody representing Mr. Phipps?" "No." "Did you explain to him that he ought to be represented?" "You did not." "Really, Inspector? Did you know, Mr. Phipps, that you had a right to be legally represented?" Mr. Phipps clung to a chair back for support, and said, "No, in a voice barely audible. "It is incredible that so-called educated people should be so ignorant of the legal procedure of their own country. This places us in a very awkward position. I doubt, Inspector, whether I should permit the prisoner, Mr. Thipps, to give evidence at all. It is a delicate position." The perspiration stood on Mr. Thipps's forehead. "Save us from our friends," whispered the Duchess to Parker. "If that cough-drop-devouring creature had openly instructed those 14 people, and what unfinished-looking faces they have, so characteristic, I always think, of the lower middle class, rather like sheep or calf's head, boiled, I mean. To bring in wilful murder against the poor little man, he couldn't have made himself plainer." "He can't let him incriminate himself, you know," said Parker. "Stuff! How could the man incriminate himself when he never did anything in his life? You men never think of anything but your red tape." Meanwhile, Mr. Thipps, wiping his brow with a handkerchief, had summoned up courage. He stood up with a kind of weak dignity, like a small white rabbit brought to bay. "I'd rather tell you. It's really very unpleasant for a man in my position. But I really couldn't have it thought for a moment that I'd committed this dreadful crime. I assure you, gentlemen, I could not bear that. No, I'd rather tell you the truth, though I'm afraid it places me in rather a... Well, I'll tell you." "You fully understand the gravity of making such a statement, Mr. Thipps?" "Quite. It's all right, I mean... Might I have a drink of water?" "Take your time," said the coroner, at the same time robbing his remark of all conviction by an impatient glance at his watch. "Thank you, sir. Well, then, it's true I got to St. Pancras at 10. But there was a man in the carriage with me. He'd got in at Leicester. I didn't recognise him at first, but he turned out to be an old schoolfellow of mine." "What was this gentleman's name?" Mr. Thipps shrank together visibly. "I'm afraid I can't tell you that. You see, well, you will see, it would get him into trouble, and I couldn't do that, no. Oh, I really couldn't. Not if my life depended on it. No," he added, as the ominous pertinence of that last phrase smote upon him. "I'm sure I couldn't do that." "Well, well." The Duchess leaned over to Parker again. "I'm beginning to admire the little man." Mr. Thipps resumed. "When we got to St. Pancras, I was going home, but my friend said no. We hadn't met for a long time, and we ought to make a night of it, was his expression. I fear I was weak, and I let him over-persuade me to accompany him to one of his haunts. And I use that word advisedly. I assure you, sir, that if I had known beforehand where we were going, I never would have set foot in the place. I cloak-roomed my bag, for he did not like the notion of our being encumbered with it, and we got into a taxicab and drove to the corner of Tottenham Court Road and Oxford Street. We then walked a little way and turned into a side street, I do not recollect which, where there was an open door with a light shining out. There was a man at a counter, and my friend bought some tickets, and I heard the man at the counter say something to him about your friend, meaning me, and my friend said, 'Oh, yes, he's been here before, haven't you, Alf?' which is what they called me at school, for I assure you, sir, I never had, and nothing in the world should induce me to go to such a place again. Well, we went down into a room underneath, where there were drinks, and my friend had several, and made me take one or two, for I am an abstemious man as a rule, and he talked to some other men and girls who were there. A very vulgar set of people, I thought them. Oh, I wouldn't say but what some of the young ladies were nice-looking enough. One of them sat on my friend's knee and called him a slow old thing and told him to come on. So we all went into another room, where there was a lot of dancing people, doing them up-to-date dances. My friend went and danced, and I sat on the sofa. One of the young ladies came up to me and said, didn't I dance? And I said no. So she said, wouldn't I stand her a drink then? You'll stand us a drink then, darling. That was what she said. And I said, wasn't it after hours?
and she said it didn't matter. So I ordered the drink. A gin and bitters it was, for I didn't like not to. The young lady seemed to expect it of me. I felt it wouldn't be gentlemanly to refuse when she asked. But it went against my conscience. Such a young girl she was. And she put her arm round my neck afterwards and kissed me, just like as if she was paying for the drink. That really went to my heart, said Mr. Sips, a little ambiguously, but with uncommon emphasis. Here someone at the back said, "Cheero!" and a sound was heard as of the noisy smacking of lips. "Remove the person who made that improper noise. Go on, please, Mr. Sips." Well, about 12:30, as I should reckon, things began to get a bit lively, and I was looking for my friend to say good night, not wishing to stay longer, as you'll understand, when I saw him with one of the young ladies, and they seemed to be getting on altogether too well, if you follow me. My friend pulling the ribbons off her shoulder, and the young lady laughing, and so on. So I thought I'd just slip quietly out, when I heard a scuffle and a shout, and before I knew what was happening there were half a dozen policemen in, and the lights went out, and everybody stampeding and shouting. Quite horrid it was. I was knocked down in the rush. I hit my head a nasty knock on a chair. That's when I got the bruise they asked me about. I was dreadfully afraid I'd never get away, and it had all come out, and perhaps my photograph would be in the papers, when someone caught hold of me. I think it was the young lady I'd given the gin and bitters to, and she said, "This way," and pushed me along a passage and out at the back somewhere. So I ran through some streets and found myself in Goodge Street, and there I got a taxi and came home. I saw the account of the raid afterwards in the papers. I saw my friend had escaped, and so as it wasn't the sort of thing I wanted to be made public, I didn't want to get him into difficulties. I just said nothing. But that's the truth. Well, Mr. Sips, we shall be able to substantiate a certain amount of this story. Your friend's name? No, not on any account. Very good. Now, can you tell us what time you did get in? About 1:30, I should think. Well, really, I was so upset. Quite so. Did you go straight to bed? Yes. I took my sandwich and a glass of milk first. I thought it might settle my insides, so to speak. Not being accustomed to alcohol so late at night, and on an empty stomach, as you may say. Quite so. Nobody sat up for you? Nobody. How long did you take getting to bed, first and last? Mr. Sips thought it might have been half an hour. Did you visit the bathroom before turning in? No. And you heard nothing in the night? No. I fell asleep. I was rather agitated, so I took a little dose to make me sleep, and what with being so tired and the milk and the dose, I just tumbled right off. I didn't wake till Gladys called me. Further questioning elicited little from Mr. Sips. Yes, the bathroom window had been open when he went in the morning. He was sure of that, and he had spoken very sharply to the girl about it. He was ready to answer any questions. He would be only too happy to have this dreadful affair sifted to the bottom. Gladys Horrocks stated she'd been in Mr. Phipps's employment about 3 months. Her previous employers would speak to her character. It was her duty to make the round of the flat at night, when she had seen Mrs. Phipps to bed at 10. Yes, she remembered doing so on Monday evening. She'd looked into all the rooms. Did she recollect shutting the bathroom window that night? Well, no, she couldn't swear to it, not in particular, but when Mr. Phipps called her into the bathroom in the morning, it certainly was open. She'd not been into the bathroom before Mr. Phipps went in. Well, yes, it had happened that she'd left that window open before, when anyone had been having a bath in the evening and had left the blind down. Mrs. Phipps had had a bath on Monday evening. Mondays were one of her regular bath nights. She was very much afraid she hadn't shut the window on Monday night, though she wished her head had been cut off before she'd been so forgetful. Here the witness burst into tears and was given some water, while the coroner refreshed himself with a third lozenge. Recovering, witness stated that she had certainly looked into all the rooms before going to bed. No, it was quite impossible for a body to be hidden in the flat without her seeing it. She had been in the kitchen all evening,
and there wasn't hardly room to keep a best dinner service there, let alone a body. Old Mrs. Phipps sat in the drawing-room. Yes, she was sure she'd been into the dining-room. How? Because she put Mr. Phipps's milk and sandwiches there, ready for him. There had been nothing in there, that she could swear to, nor yet in her own bedroom, nor in the hall. Had she searched the bedroom cupboard and the box-room? Well, no, not to say searched. She wasn't used to searching people's houses for skeletons every night, so that a man might have concealed himself in the box-room or a wardrobe. She supposed he might. In reply to a woman juror, well, yes, she was walking out with a young man. Williams was his name, Bill Williams. Well, yes, William Williams, if I insisted. He was a glazier by profession. Well, yes, he had been in the flat sometimes. Well, she supposed you might say he was acquainted with the flat. Had she ever? No, she hadn't. And if she'd thought such a question was going to be put to a respectable girl, she wouldn't have offered to give evidence. The vicar of St. Mary's would speak to her character and to Mr. Williams's. Last time Mr. Williams was at the flat was a fortnight ago. Well, no, it wasn't exactly the last time she'd seen Mr. Williams. Well, yes, the last time was Monday. Well, yes, Monday night. Well, if she must tell the truth, she must. Yes, the officer had cautioned her, but there wasn't any harm in it, and it was better to lose her place than be hung, for it was a cruel shame a girl couldn't have a bit of fun without a nasty corpse coming in through the window to get her into difficulties. After she'd put Mrs. Phipps to bed, she had slipped out to the Plumbers and Glaziers' ball at the Black-Faced Ram. Mr. Williams had met her there and brought her back. He could testify to where she'd been, and that there wasn't no harm in it. She'd left before the end of the ball. It might have been 2 o'clock when she got back. She'd got the keys of her flat from Mrs. Phipps's drawer when Mrs. Phipps wasn't looking. She had asked leave to go, but didn't get it, along with Mr. Phipps being away that night. She was bitterly sorry she'd behaved so, and she was sure she'd be punished for it. She'd heard nothing suspicious when she came in. She'd gone straight to bed without looking round the flat. She wished she was dead.